labor of love. If we're talking about real businesses and industries, then there has to be a context to the content in which we build. Otherwise, there's no hope of reaching our audience.
Bill, the group says the context is real important. What about Firefly and Crayon and these other artificial intelligence engines that might do that selecting for a consumer and reader? Does that put us out of business?
It doesn't put you out of business, but it definitely reduces the value of the editor in picking stories, or it increases. I mean, one of the problems that you know, Ron, if I go down and I read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, he kind of has to have figured out what I think is important, and he has to do that for your all circulation, but you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of folks in the Atlanta area. There's some things that are pretty easy. The Braves, pretty much everybody will want to know about that, but you get into some of the more esoteric stuff. And it's harder. So you go to these artificial intelligence agents, it's not even artificial intelligence. You just sit there and say, I want to know about this, this, and this. And they deliver it to you. And then if they're smart, they say, oh, you know, if you like those things, you'll probably like these things as well. And are they going to put newspapers out of business? No, because the fundamental content behind it is still coming from the New York Times, from the Atlanta papers, from the San Jose paper. But what it's doing is it's packaging all these things at the aggregate level across all the internet.
Newspapers are not going out of business.
Thank you.
No one, I think there's a defensiveness sometimes in newspapers themselves that brings some of this up. It's not going out of business. You know, television didn't go out of business with cable, right? But I will tell you that 10 years ago I sat in a conference in a meeting like this where Ted Turner was on, and there were some broadcast network executives, and they were saying, this isn't journalism, this isn't going to work, this is Chicken Noodle Network, you know, it's spending too much money, it's not making any money. And Time Corporate offered $5 million for it, right? And didn't do it. And now they paid $7 billion for it. And it's the place where on television, news is defined. Now, this is just a matter of, do you embrace, do you push away? Newspapers are not going out of business. There is a way to take your core competencies and move up the value chain in this new medium. That's what this session should be about.
Let's go with that. Very quickly, take our core competencies and move up the value chain. Thoughts about doing that, Farad?
Well, I'm really torn in some ways. On the one hand, I believe deeply, profoundly in journalism, in credibility, in reporting, in each journalist having a stake in his or her story, making or breaking his or her reputation. Every time you put something out, it says something about you, it says something about your institution. On the other hand, I'm thinking of this guy named Billy Sternberg who does an analysis of how television is changing. Now, while ABC, NBC, and CBS are still the most powerful television entities, especially when it comes to news, there's no question that not only did cable change the equation, but that the cumulative effect will be much more profound when it comes to the next generation. I grew up, I'm 27, I grew up having the TV go off. You know, the flag, the stars and stripes, and then there was fuzz. Kids today don't get any fuzz. There's no fuzz. It's 24 hours at least of infomercials and usually of something else on television. How do they know which one is better than the other? And Sternberg makes a very persuasive case that they put as much weight on network A as network B as network C. The more things there are, the more choices you have, the more diffuse your loyalty, if there is any at all. And so I think, you know, I just worry that, I mean, I want there to be more voices because I think sometimes, you know, the traditional news business has become complacent. The traditional newspaper business is not serving young adults well, and that's one constituency I've looked at. It's not serving African Americans well. Those are two constituencies that I belong to and I care about. The newspaper business isn't doing a great job of that. Will online do better? I'm not sure about that.
Ron, how do we get indispensable?
Well, I think we can learn maybe from what she's saying. I think that we need to be watching the things that you're working with, that you're reading online yourself, and see if there are ways that our newspapers can interact with those things, build on those things, be part of that conversation. There's wonderful, exciting stuff there if you've got time enough to go look it up. And we got to figure out some way to bring the best of that into our printed form and extend the conversation rather than running away from it.
Regina, your last shot at newspaper editors, what can they do to move up that value chain that Ted talks about?
Well, I'm basically in agreement, with the last two comments. I think that there has to be a merging of concerns. I think that as Farai, I also profoundly believe in the institution of journalism. I come from traditional media journalism, and just because I'm now in a digital media environment doesn't lessen for me the importance or impact of news journalism. However, I think that given the medium with which now I spend 90% of my time focusing, I feel like there has to be a way in which some of the elements that have appealed to me from a sort of older medium, the paper format, have got to sort of filter through in the digital environment. I think there really has to be a cooperative relationship, otherwise both stand to lose greatly.
Mary Jo?
I think we have to listen to what Bill was saying about the content of our newspapers, and if you strip away the material that is provided from other places, we need to strip some of that away and start bringing what we can really bring, which is the local interpretation of lots of different things and more localness, because that's where our indispensability truly lies.
Bill?
It's interesting. This kind of started off as old people versus young people, and are we losing the young people? And I was going, it probably had the same discussions in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. That's always been the case, that young people don't think the same as older people. And the older people always control the media distribution.
A lot of people say it's different this time. Do you reject that?
Baloney. I totally reject that. If I was in the 60s was different. The 90s, the 90s is not different. The thing that's different in the 90s is that you now have this technological ability for these people to go out and get their own news. And it's the technology, it's not the, do we need to change our content? It's more the case of, you go to any newspaper and they have hundreds of years worth of papers up on the walls. And you look at the ones from the 1890s and you look at the ones from the 1990s and they look pretty much the same. And we get to the, this is the irritant and is it going to form a pearl? Papers have not had to change for 100 years. And, there's just real questions in my mind about, are they going to be able to make this change, which is the first really fundamental change in the way that they have to do business in 100 years.
I disagree very much with what you're saying there, in that everybody in this room, and most of us here at this dais, can attest to the fact that we've undergone changes at the speed of light over the last 20 years. It wasn't so very long ago, 25 years ago, that our industry was printing with virtually the same methods Gutenberg was using.
You three don't think we've changed at the speed of light, do you?
We have had to make fundamental changes very rapidly.
Brian, just quickly, why not?
Well, there's so many reasons. I think that, I think part of the reason that the newspaper audience is diminishing is because they've remained essentially the same, and this country is changing on many levels, generationally, racially, and the sense of community. We do not just live within our communities. Most people commute. Most people have a broader sense of this nation. Newspapers may or may not reflect that.
Ted?
I want to go back to how to get on the value chain. I think that there's a short but open window to become in your community, to take your brand, build another brand around it so that you become a local aggregated program, a little bit what Boston.com and Bill were trying to do, where you embrace the other voices, you build community in it so that you have your brand and it can stay just the way it is, but you create another business, work with us, we'll get you the circulation and the tools, and together, hang on, together we'll fight Microsoft.
I hate to cut it off, but I've been a taskmaster this week in making sure the trains run on time. And it's 1 minute before 11, and I've got to hold myself to the same standard. I hope you'll join me in thanking our panel for a great discussion.
Yesterday, President Clinton addressed the American Society of Newspaper Editors. You can see his remarks later this morning at 7:10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Get C-SPAN schedule information 24 hours a day by calling our schedule hotline at area code 202-628-2205. Our program schedules are also available online. You'll find us on the Internet, the World Wide Web, and a variety of online services. You can watch for schedule information. At 15 and 45 minutes past each hour, check the bottom of your screen for updates. Also, several times each day, listings of programs coming up over the next few hours. These on-screen updates normally air just before 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern Time and at other times through the day. The Preview channel provides our program schedule as well. If your local cable company carries the Preview channel, you can check it throughout the day for updated C-SPAN schedule information.
Next, House members of both parties review their recent trip to 5 countries in Southeast Asia. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, the leader of the trip, and Democrat John Dingell, the most senior member in the House, made these remarks on the House floor Thursday.
Extend my remarks and to convey the control of the 1 hour to the Speaker Gingrich when he comes to the chamber. Says that it has to be turned off. Not result liability. A reasonable per se. Again, that I think these other concerns, they are on the station and it's about the industry you have Harris Miller. Harris worked together on he was involved before and he knows the numbers. And I can truly terrific the concern Capitol Hill. Is one individual. What this industry they and to be involved in the process because what's the first that in a very with the question of inappropriate over the internet telecommunications gets well no standard the Supreme Court so back into our life what should we do? Let's have a preference that schools what their children what material they over the internet where today give parents and that kind of as far as we ought to go government ought to unfortunately in the minority and there is a legislation on that result these standards come forward has been upheld and that is material that and then harmful to minors what that means more clearly standpoint of this I would suggest will result with the government of censoring material that is transferred. We ought to that I've enjoyed one that censors development and that gives parents we should perhaps have more of a company holders but I got we had this a sea of virtually nothing to encourage increase your numbers, to sustain this effort, so there isn't, will be the standard. Encryption is going, if we receive it, encryption standard is interested in technology, follow through with. Our technology is very usable. These are not need of which backdoor key. Very important from the standpoint, as you have, making sure that is employed use of the internet businesses. Another, at some point, extended the role of helping you communicate. We have role in the last development increasing toward development of primarily and the connection laboratory development benefit agenda in Congress, you might imagine. There have been efforts provided of endeavor in your industry, sure that there is a role in development technology participation as well. Not other concerns you're going to have in the federal the only point that you be involved. Parents on the job for you with others in your company and determination you are going to be holders and subject of need your help. As I said, it's an age thing. A lot about it. Some comment. I imagine I could Dan Berg sitting in the back. Spot on the hill. Like he and that week that we are. So I think it's important.
Can you give us kinds of negotiations between now and resolve it?
Right, what reasons is that? Let me begin by saying we had all of of these talks here. The most difficult was OSP, the associated with difficult. That has been small time. That measure is slightly that question, and that is one set of problems. The black box. In retrospect, we have had negotiations on both on parallel tracks. They thought the relatively once resolved standards. Well, what is practical? What I think is that manufacturers work together, and there that communication industry there we obviously system that Senate and these others. I think it's very important for a listener to question of OS and are essential. They have the same group in that is size. In fact, we direct an interest of issues about a little bit of reorganization who's going to have the standpoint, oh, I've got time, you can try to enforce it, but this is sort of the time to reach resolution. Substance was the key to this. Lies. The question of what we can say. The amendment is held as long as is by primary use of force. The intent to use the action. As long as the word prominent, I think, pretty firm right. Then it ought to be that as that is in the case carried proving that manufacturers using exactly modified, I frankly directly but close. Give the confidence that when they are legitimate person going to be held responsible, somebody else uses their time illegitimate.
To copyright music, and I'm wondering legislation is that, or it's the State Department.
Legislation directly address international to the foreign content to send the States nation of the same law in the United States could enforce it. Of course, we can address beyond. However, domestic have an on the internet for this reason. My friend, they not today, literally, leave us World Trade Organization and intellectual headquartered that there be signed on to virtually all employees internationally to employ doctors. Vietnam. Last, which, sorry to say, assumption, service provider, absolute line, every instance, that words are used by parties to the material. Away from that, a better balance, the law we're about. But nationally, our are going to have ability. I think one, and we have people law that very on in place, and I don't think would then other countries with a dramatic without essential that standard is replicated around. And if the rest of some different things we consider ours, consistent with the world is doing. As a former, we are, in terms of property rights, the world is addressing this issue. And once we hear those facts, we're going to have on the internet. Well, we have directed the subject would be better addressed state government court filing. Copyright is involved. Personal rules to continue, but court by what matters, and there, the time there's unless there's order available city doesn't have so concept. So what's the problem? Legislation. Secondly, now is that in what I wise exercise has decided house on the that example in more time lawmaking process effective substantive measures Daniel presented Virginia the district of more than 20. He used to say addressing groups the only reason that the Constitution has a lot of wisdom in that. House and Senate committees work together. Sort of an arching political application is an exception subject to very but working together well in this time reason has his interest not intended to until he's among the states we're close at least on going to defer and the other case one other very decided the use of computers in a reason we have internet tens of millions a handful of years self-explanatory therefore are those that have uniform achieve because the right law fairly lead develop the other traditional form as well in the we have that one held computer research was invited business the computer in law a piece of that was actually person who called the computer had a license was open chairman fled copyright downloaded it simply for the fact traditional print very well applied having to hear welcome
You can later around 8 7:40.
On America, this memorial economy. It is still degree fine. It is not primarily everything. Your time, Judith Miller.
I moved